Welcome to Cheaters Theater. Over 95% of you watch without subscribing. Please like the video, subscribe, and turn on the bell. And tell us, where are you watching from? We'd love to know. Let's begin. Nolan Reeves stood in his home office reviewing architectural blueprints under the amber glow of his desk lamp. At 38, he possessed the kind of quiet intensity that came from 19 years in military intelligence before transitioning to civilian contracting. His wife, Megan, called him obsessive, but Nolan preferred thorough details mattered. They always had dinners ready, Megan announced from the doorway, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite being home all day. At 36, she maintained the appearance of a woman 10 years younger through rigorous maintenance and careful presentation. Ava's already at the table. Nolan glanced at his 17-year-old daughter through the office window. Ava sat in the dining room, picking at her phone with the distracted air of a teenager. She had her mother's delicate features, but Nolan's dark, analytical eyes. Unlike Megan, Ava possessed a sharp intelligence that reminded Nolan of himself at that age. "Martin's joining us," Megan added, straightening an already perfect picture frame. He wanted to discuss Ava's college applications. Judge Martin Hale, Megan's father. The man had never warmed to Nolan, viewing him as beneath his daughter's station. A judge for 13 years, Martin wielded his position like a weapon, reminding everyone in his orbit of his importance. Nolan had learned to tolerate the man's condescension for Megan's sake. The dining room carried the sterile perfection that defined their Westchester home. Crystal glasses, imported china, and carefully arranged flowers created an atmosphere more suited to a magazine spread than family dinner. Nolan noticed how Megan's movements seemed rehearsed. Each gesture was calculated for maximum effect. "Nolan," Martin nodded curtly as he entered, his silver hair immaculate and his suit expensive. "Still playing with blueprints." "I see government contracts," Nolan replied evenly. "Someone has to build the facilities our country needs." Martin's smile held no warmth. "Indeed, though I sometimes wonder if Ava might benefit from exposure to more intellectual pursuits. Perhaps law." Following in her grandfather's footsteps, Ava looked up from her phone, rolling her eyes. "I want to study engineering, Grandpa." "Like Dad." "Engineering." "Engineering," Martin repeated, as if the word tasted sour. "How practical." Megan quickly intervened. "Ava, tell your grandfather about your science fair project." As Ava launched into an explanation of her award-winning chemistry experiment, Nolan observed the dynamics around the table. Martin dominated conversations with his legal anecdotes and judicial wisdom. Megan hung on his every word with an attention that seemed excessive, even for a devoted daughter. Ava responded politely, but Nolan caught the subtle eye rolls and forced smiles. "The Peterson case was particularly satisfying," Martin was saying. "Some people think they can outsmart the system, but justice always prevails." Nolan had heard this story before. Martin enjoyed recounting his legal victories, particularly those involving defendants who had underestimated him. The judge took personal satisfaction in surprising people who thought they were cleverer than they were. "Speaking of justice," Martin continued, fixing Nolan with a stare, "I've been thinking about your security clearance. Such things can be fragile. One never knows when past associations might prove problematic." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Nolan had no problematic associations, but Martin's position gave him influence with federal investigators. The judge was reminding Nolan of his vulnerability. "Dad's record is spotless," Ava interjected, her voice sharp. "He served our country with distinction." Martin's expression softened when addressing his granddaughter. "Of course, dear. I simply meant that in today's climate, even exemplary citizens must be careful." After dinner, Nolan retreated to his office while Megan walked her father to his car. Through the window, he watched them confer in hushed tones beside Martin's black Audi. Their body language suggested an intimacy that went beyond normal family interaction. Megan touched Martin's arm frequently, and their heads bent close together as they spoke. Nolan's military training had taught him to observe patterns, to notice when normal behavior shifted into something else. Over the past 6 months, he had noted increasing private conversations between Megan and her father, phone calls that ended abruptly when he entered rooms, meetings that Megan claimed were about family business but provided no details. His laptop chimed with an encrypted message from his former colleague, Owen Barrett, now working private intelligence in Washington. Owen's messages usually contained updates on potential contracts, but this one was different. Interesting development regarding your father-in-law. Judge Hale's been making inquiries about your background through unofficial channels. Thought you should know. Coffee soon. I see. Nolan stared at the message, pieces falling into place. Martin wasn't making idle threats about security clearances. He was actively investigating Nolan, looking for leverage. But why? What had changed to make Martin view him as a threat requiring neutralization? Megan returned, her demeanor artificially bright. Dad's so proud of Ava. He thinks she has real potential for law school. She wants to be an engineer. Plans change. Dad could open doors for her that engineering never could. Nolan studied his wife's face, noting the careful way she avoided direct eye contact. What kind of doors? Opportunities, connections, a better life, she said, then gestured vaguely around the room. Better than what? We have a good life, Megan. Good isn't great, Nolan. Ava deserves great. The conversation felt scripted, as if Megan had rehearsed these responses. Nolan's instincts, honed by years of intelligence work, screamed that something significant was happening beneath the surface of his seemingly perfect family life. Later that night, as Megan slept beside him, Nolan lay awake analyzing the evening's interactions, Martin's veiled threats, Megan's strange behavior, the private conversations, his former colleagues' warning about background investigations. In intelligence work, Nolan had learned that most betrayals began with small compromises, minor deceptions that snowballed into major treachery. The key was recognizing the pattern before it became unstoppable. Nolan Reeves had survived nearly 2 decades in military intelligence by being methodical, patient, and utterly relentless when necessary. Had learned to think several moves ahead, to anticipate his enemy's strategies before they fully formed. Whatever Martin and Megan were planning, they had made one critical error. They'd underestimated him. For weeks after the dinner with Martin, Nolan's suspicions crystallized into certainty. Had been conducting discreet surveillance on his own family, using skills that felt rusty but remained sharp enough for the task at hand. Megan's patterns had shifted dramatically. She claimed to have joined a book club that met every Tuesday and Thursday evening. But when Nolan discreetly followed her, she drove to an upscale hotel downtown. Through the lobby windows, he watched her meet the same man repeatedly. Victor Langley, a prominent defense attorney known for high-profile cases and an expensive lifestyle. Langley was everything Nolan wasn't: tall, theatrical, with silver-streaked hair and an easy charm that came from years of persuading juries. He wore suits that cost more than most people's monthly salary and drove a sleek Jaguar that matched his inflated ego. Nolan photographed their meetings from a distance, noting the intimate nature of their interactions, hand-holding across restaurant tables, Megan's body language, leaning in, touching Langley's arm, laughing with an animation she hadn't shown at home in months. The affair itself wasn't surprising. Nolan had sensed Megan's growing dissatisfaction with their marriage, her desire for something more glamorous than a government contractor could provide. What puzzled him was Martin's involvement. Using contacts from his intelligence days, Nolan commissioned a deeper investigation into Langley's background. The report revealed interesting details. Langley specialized in cases involving federal contractors and government security issues. Head represented several defendants in cases that touched Nolan's industry. More significantly, Langley had a professional relationship with Judge Martin Hale. They'd worked together on the Judicial Nominating Committee and shared membership in an exclusive club frequented by federal judges and prominent attorneys. Nolan began to see the outline of something larger than a simple affair. Langley and Martin weren't just connected through Megan. They had existing professional ties that predated her involvement with the attorney. Ava, meanwhile, remained oblivious to the undercurrents destroying her family. She focused on her senior year studies, college applications, and her part-time job at a local chemistry lab. Nolan made sure to maintain normalcy in their relationship, helping with homework and attending her academic competitions. "Dad, is everything okay?" Ava asked one evening as they worked together on a calculus problem. "You seem different lately." Nolan looked up from the textbook, meeting his daughter's concerned gaze. Ava had inherited his analytical mind and was too perceptive to fool completely. "Just work stress," he lied smoothly. "Government contracts can be complicated." Mom seems stressed, too. And Grandpa Martin's been calling a lot more than usual. Ava's observation confirmed Nolan's suspicions about increased coordination between Megan and her father. Whatever they were planning was accelerating. Has your mother said anything about their conversations? Ava shrugged. Just family stuff, she says. But sometimes I hear my name mentioned, so I guess they're discussing my college plans. Nolan kept his expression neutral, but internally alarm bells rang. If Martin and Megan were discussing Ava in their private conversations, his daughter might be more than a peripheral concern in whatever scheme they were developing. That weekend, Nolan used a family dinner as an opportunity to probe deeper. Martin arrived with an unusual gift, an expensive tablet loaded with legal research software for Ava's college preparation. Martin announced grandly, "I've been thinking about her future, and I believe she should consider pre-law rather than engineering." Ava accepted the gift politely, but shot Nolan a questioning look. They had discussed her plans extensively, and she had never expressed interest in law school. "That's very thoughtful, Martin," Nolan said carefully, though Ava's quite committed to her engineering goals. "Plans evolve," Martin replied, his tone suggesting the matter was already decided. "I've spoken with admissions committees at several prestigious law schools. With my recommendation and the right preparation, Ava could have her choice of institutions." "I appreciate the gesture," Ava said diplomatically, "but I really do want to study engineering. I've already submitted applications to MIT and Stanford." Martin's face darkened slightly. "Those applications can be withdrawn with my connections. Far better opportunities await." The conversation continued in that vein, with Martin becoming increasingly insistent about Ava's legal career while she politely but firmly maintained her preferences. Megan supported her father's position with an enthusiasm that seemed forced. Nolan watched the dynamic with growing unease. Martin wasn't simply expressing a grandfather's wishes. He was applying pressure, as if Ava's compliance was crucial to some larger plan. After dinner, while Megan and Martin huddled in another private conversation, Ava approached Nolan in his office. "Dad, I don't want to go to law school. Grandpa Martin's being really pushy about it, and Mom's acting strange. What's going on?" Nolan considered how much to reveal. Ava was mature for her age and deserved honesty, but full disclosure might put her in danger if his suspicions proved correct. "Your grandfather has strong opinions about what's best for you," Nolan said finally. "But the decision is yours, not his. It feels like more than that, like they're planning something I don't know about." Ava's intuition was proving as sharp as her intellect. Nolan made a decision that would prove crucial in the weeks ahead. "Ava, I want you to be very careful around your grandfather and even your mother for a while. Don't discuss your college plans, your activities, or anything personal with them. Can you do that for me?" His daughter studied his face with the same intensity Nolan brought to analyzing threats. "You think something bad is happening?" "I think something complicated is happening. And until I understand what it is, I want you protected." Ava nodded solemnly. "Okay, Dad. I trust you." That trust would soon be tested in ways neither of them could imagine. Nolan spent the following week implementing enhanced security measures around Ava. He modified her phone to send location updates, arranged for discreet surveillance during her commute, and coordinated with the chemistry lab, where she worked to monitor her activities. His precautions proved prescient. On Thursday evening, while Megan was supposedly at book club, Nolan received an alert that Ava's phone had been turned off during what should have been her routine drive home from work. 20 minutes later, Megan called with panic in her voice. "Nolan, something terrible has happened. Ava's been arrested." The police station felt like a bureaucratic maze designed to frustrate and intimidate. Nolan arrived to find Ava in an interrogation room, still wearing her lab coat and looking utterly bewildered. Through the observation window, he watched Detective Mark Delaney questioning his 17-year-old daughter about charges that made no sense. "She's accused of producing prohibited compounds," Megan explained, her voice carrying precisely the right mixture of shock and maternal concern. "Apparently, they found evidence at her workplace." Nolan studied his wife's performance. Megan's distress appeared genuine, but had learned not to trust appearances where she was concerned. "What kind of evidence?" "Chemical residue, precursor materials, equipment that had been modified for illicit production." The detective said Ava had been using the lab after hours to make restricted substances. The accusation was both sophisticated and absurd. Ava worked part-time at a legitimate research facility, cataloging chemical inventory and assisting with basic procedures. She had access to chemicals and equipment. But the idea that she'd risk her college prospects for prohibited activity was laughable to anyone who knew her. "Where's her lawyer?" Nolan demanded. Martin's handling it, Megan said quickly. He's the best option we have. Nolan's blood chilled. Having Martin steer Ava's defense was like assigning a fox to guard a henhouse. But before he could object, his father-in-law appeared with his usual commanding presence. This is a serious situation, Martin announced, his tone grave but controlled. The evidence appears substantial. Ava was caught on security cameras accessing the lab during unauthorized hours. Ava wouldn't do this, Nolan said flatly. Of course not. Martin agreed smoothly, which is why we need to mount an aggressive defense. Unfortunately, the prosecutor is ambitious and sees this as a high-profile case. A judge's granddaughter caught producing prohibited compounds makes headlines. Nolan recognized the manipulation immediately. Martin was positioning himself as Ava's savior while subtly suggesting that his own reputation made the situation more dangerous for her. I want to see the evidence. All in due time. Right now, Ava needs bail. I've arranged for a hearing tomorrow morning. Can't we get her released tonight? Martin shook his head solemnly. The allegations are too serious. She'll have to spend the night in juvenile detention, but I assure you, she'll be safe. That night, Nolan didn't sleep. He spent hours analyzing the situation from every angle, applying intelligence training to deconstruct what had happened to his daughter. The timing was suspicious. Ava's arrest coincided with increased pressure about her college plans and Martin's growing insistence on directing her future. The allegations were serious enough to derail her academic prospects, but specific enough to suggest someone with inside knowledge of the lab's operations. Most concerning was Martin's immediate availability to handle Ava's defense. For a federal judge to personally direct his granddaughter's criminal matter was highly unusual, potentially even inappropriate. But it gave Martin complete control over Ava's legal strategy. The bail hearing the next morning felt choreographed. Martin presented Ava as a confused teenager who had made a terrible mistake under peer pressure. The prosecutor, a young woman named Kara Middleton, argued that the evidence was overwhelming and requested significant bail given the severity of the allegations. Your Honor, Martin addressed Judge Paul Ramirez. My granddaughter is a straight A student with no prior record. She poses no flight risk and has strong family support. I personally guarantee her appearance at all future proceedings. Judge Ramirez, clearly uncomfortable with the unusual situation of a federal judge influencing the defense, set bail at $45,000. Nolan paid immediately, wanting Ava home regardless of the financial cost. But Ava's release came with strict conditions. She was ordered to surrender her passport, remain within the county, and submit to weekly compliance screening. Most significantly, she was prohibited from having any contact with anyone from the chemistry lab where Shed worked. This is insane, Ava said during the drive home. Dad, I never made anything illegal. I don't even know how to do that. Why would they think I did this? Nolan met her eyes in the rearview mirror. Someone wants you to look guilty. The question is why? Over the following days, Nolan conducted his own investigation into Ava's case. Using his security contacts, he accessed the lab surveillance footage and discovered something interesting. The cameras showed Ava entering the building during unauthorized hours, but the timestamps were wrong. The footage had been edited to create a false timeline. More disturbing, the chemical evidence supposedly found at Ava's workstation included substances Shed never handled in her legitimate duties. Someone had planted materials and manipulated video to frame his daughter for a violation she couldn't have committed. Nolan's investigation led him to a shocking discovery. Victor Langley had represented the lab's previous owner in a federal case involving improper handling of hazardous chemicals. Langley had intimate knowledge of the facility's operations, security systems, and chemical inventory. The picture became clearer. Langley hadn't just seduced Megan. Had used his relationship with her to gather intelligence about Ava's activities and vulnerabilities. Martin hadn't coincidentally become available to direct Ava's defense. Had been planning to control her legal path from the beginning. But why frame Ava for prohibited production? What did they gain by damaging a 17-year-old's future? The answer came during another family dinner. This one notably tense despite Martin's attempts at normalcy. I've been reviewing Ava's case, Martin announced, and I believe we should consider a plea bargain. Nolan set down his fork carefully. A plea bargain for something she didn't do. The materials are concerning, Nolan. The prosecutor has surveillance footage, chemical analysis, and witness statements. A jury might not be sympathetic to a privileged teenager with access to a chemistry lab. What kind of plea bargain? Megan asked, her voice carefully neutral. Possession with intent to supply restricted materials rather than production. Reduced to a misdemeanor with probation and community service. Ava would avoid detention, but would have to enter a guilty plea. Ava looked stricken. Grandpa Martin, I can't plead guilty to something I didn't do. That would go on my record forever. Records can be sealed or expunged, Martin said dismissively. What matters is avoiding a lengthy sentence. Nolan saw the trap now. A guilty plea would permanently damage Ava's future, making her dependent on Martin's connections for any legitimate opportunities. More importantly, it would prevent any detailed investigation into how the supposed evidence had been manufactured. We're not pleading guilty, Nolan said firmly. Martin's expression hardened. Nolan, you're not a lawyer. You don't understand the complexities of criminal defense. I understand when my daughter's being set up. The accusation hung in the air like a live wire. Megan gasped audibly and Martin's face flushed with anger. That's a serious allegation, Martin said coldly. Are you suggesting that I would frame my own granddaughter? I'm suggesting that someone did. And until I know who and why, Ava doesn't plead guilty to anything. Martin stood abruptly. Perhaps you need time to consider what's best for Ava. Proceedings can be unpredictable. Evidence sometimes emerges that changes everything. The threat was unmistakable. Martin was warning Nolan that resisting the plea bargain would result in worse consequences for Ava. That night, as Nolan reviewed the case files in his office, Megan approached him with tears in her eyes. Nolan, please reconsider the plea bargain. Dad knows what he's doing. Ava could face serious time if we fight this. Nolan studied his wife's face, searching for any sign of genuine concern for their daughter. What he saw instead was calculation masked as maternal anxiety. Megan, do you believe Ava did anything illegal? She hesitated just long enough to reveal the truth. I don't know what to believe anymore. The materials seem so clear. Our daughter is being framed. The question is whether you're going to help me prove it or continue supporting your father's scheme. Megan's mask slipped slightly. What scheme? Your father's trying to pressure Ava into a guilty plea for something she didn't do by controlling her defense to prevent a real investigation. You're being paranoid, Nolan. Not everything is a conspiracy. But Nolan's caution had kept him alive through 19 years of intelligence work, and every instinct he possessed screamed that his family was under attack from within. 2 days before Ava's hearing was scheduled to begin, Martin delivered his ultimatum during what he claimed would be a final family conference. I've spoken with the prosecutor, Martin announced. The plea offer expires tomorrow. After that, Ava faces the full allegations with no possibility of a reduced disposition. And if she's convicted? Nolan asked. Martin's expression remained grave, but Nolan caught a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. Given the nature of the case and Ava's age, she could be tried as an adult. 9 to 14 years in federal custody. Ava went pale. 14 years? It's possible, Martin confirmed, which is why the plea bargain is so important. Probation versus custody, Ava. The choice seems obvious. Nolan realized that Martin wasn't just threatening his daughter. He was enjoying it, savoring the power he held over Ava's future, the fear he was instilling in a 17-year-old girl. We need time to discuss this as a family, Nolan said. Time is a luxury Ava can't afford, Martin replied. The decision must be made tomorrow. After Martin left, Nolan found Ava in her room, staring at college brochures she'd probably never get to use. Dad, I can't go away. I can't plead guilty. What do I do? Nolan sat beside his daughter, the weight of her trust both humbling and terrifying. Ava, I need you to trust me completely. Can you do that? She nodded without hesitation. Tomorrow, when Martin asks you to accept the plea bargain, I want you to refuse. No matter what anyone says, no matter how scared you get, refuse the plea. But what if I lose? Nolan met her eyes with absolute conviction. You won't. I promise you that. Ava studied his face with the same intensity she brought to her chemistry experiments. Whatever she saw there seemed to reassure her. Okay, Dad. I trust you. Nolan hoped that trust wouldn't prove misplaced, because tomorrow he was going to start a war that would either save his daughter or destroy them all. The morning of Ava's plea deadline, Nolan woke before dawn with the clarity that came from making irrevocable decisions. Today would determine whether his family emerged intact or whether the enemies within would complete their destruction of everything Head built. Ava sat at the breakfast table, picking at her cereal with nervous energy. Shed barely slept, but her resolve remained firm. Megan fluttered around the kitchen with artificial cheer, preparing for what she clearly expected to be Ava's capitulation. "Remember, sweetheart," Megan said, adjusting Ava's collar unnecessarily. "Grandpa Martin knows best. This plea bargain will let you move on with your life." Ava glanced at Nolan, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. "I'm not ready to make that decision yet." Megan's smile faltered slightly. "Ava, we discussed this. The deadline is today." "I know what the deadline is, Mom." The drive to Martin's office was tense. Nolan used the time to review his contingency plans, ensuring he hadn't overlooked any variables. In intelligence work, successful operations required backup strategies for every possible scenario. Martin's law office occupied the top floor of a prestigious downtown building, its mahogany-paneled walls lined with photographs of the judge posed with politicians and celebrities. The man's ego was on full display, but Nolan was more interested in the security features Head noted during previous visits. "Ava," Martin began without preamble, "I need your decision about the plea bargain. The prosecutor is waiting for my call." Ava straightened in her chair, channeling the composure Nolan had taught her. "I can't plead guilty to something I didn't do." Grandpa Martin's face darkened with genuine anger. "Ava, you're being foolish. The materials against you are overwhelming." "What materials?" Nolan interjected. "I'd like to review the prosecution's case files." "The evidence speaks for itself," Martin replied coldly. "Security footage, chemical analysis, witness statements." Ava was caught red-handed producing prohibited compounds. "Then let's go to trial and let a jury decide." Martin stood abruptly, his judicial composure cracking. "Nolan, you're gambling with your daughter's future. If Ava is convicted, she'll be sentenced as an adult. Federal custody, not some juvenile facility." "You seem very confident about the conviction," Nolan observed. "I understand criminal law better than you do. And you understand something else, don't you, Martin? You understand exactly how Ava was framed because you helped plan it." The accusation detonated in the quiet office like a grenade. Megan gasped. Ava's eyes widened, and Martin's face went through several color changes before settling on a dangerous shade of red. "How dare you," Martin snarled. "I'm trying to save Ava from her own stupidity." "No," Nolan said calmly. "You're trying to control her future by destroying her present. The question is why." Martin's legal training reasserted itself, and his expression became coldly professional. "Nolan, you're clearly under tremendous stress. Perhaps you should seek counseling while Ava and I handle her legal situation." "I'm not going anywhere. And Ava isn't pleading guilty." Martin turned to his granddaughter with the full force of his judicial authority. "Ava, your father is making a mistake that will cost you your freedom. I'm offering you a chance to salvage your life. Take it." Ava looked between her grandfather and her father, caught between two men who claimed to have her best interests at heart. Nolan could see the fear in her eyes, the weight of a decision number 17-year-old should have to make. "I trust my dad," Ava said quietly. Martin's mask finally slipped completely. "Then you're both fools. Do you think Nolan's feelings matter more than the reality of federal custody? Do you think his love will protect you from what's coming?" "What's coming, Martin?" Nolan asked. "What exactly is coming that you know about in advance?" Martin realized his mistake immediately, but it was too late. Head revealed knowledge of future events that a defense strategist shouldn't possess. "The trial," Martin said quickly. "The trial is coming, and it will destroy Ava." But Nolan had caught the slip, and more importantly, so had Ava. His daughter was smart enough to recognize when someone had revealed more than they intended. "Grandpa," Ava said slowly, "how do you know what's going to happen at my trial?" "Experience, dear. Nearly 40 years in the legal system teaches you to recognize certain patterns." Nolan stood. "Decision made. We're leaving." "Ava, get your things." "Nolan, don't do this," Megan pleaded. "Dad's trying to help. Your father is trying to manipulate Ava into accepting a conviction for something she didn't do. The question is why you're helping him." Megan's face went pale. "I'm not helping anyone do anything. I just want what's best for Ava." "Then support your daughter's innocence instead of your father's scheme." As they prepared to leave, Martin delivered his final threat with the cold precision of a man accustomed to wielding power. "Nolan, if Ava doesn't accept the plea bargain today, I can guarantee that the prosecution will pursue the maximum penalty. Federal custody, adult sentencing, no possibility of appeal. Your stubborn pride will cost Ava her life. Nolan paused at the door, his back to Martin. That sounds like more than legal advice, Martin. It sounds like inside knowledge. It sounds like reality. Nolan turned to face his father-in-law directly. You've made one critical mistake in all of this. What mistake? You've assumed that it'll allow you to destroy my daughter without consequences. Martin's expression shifted from anger to something approaching caution. For the first time in their relationship, he seemed to recognize that Nolan might be more dangerous than had calculated. Are you threatening a federal judge? In making a promise to Ava's grandfather. Touch my daughter, and I'll end you. The threat hung in the air as Nolan and Ava left the office. In the elevator, Ava finally spoke. Dad, Grandpa Martin seems to know things about my case that he shouldn't know, like he's been involved from the beginning. What makes you think that? The way he talks about the materials, the trial, what's going to happen. It's not like he's predicting the future based on experience. It's like he already knows because he helped plan it. Nolan's pride in his daughter's analytical mind was tempered by the dangerous situation they faced. Ava had reached the same conclusions he had, which meant she understood the depth of the betrayal they were confronting. Ava, what I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear. She braced herself. I'm ready. Your mother is having an affair with Victor Langley, the defense attorney. Your grandfather has been coordinating with both of them to frame you for producing prohibited compounds. The goal is to force you into a position where you're completely dependent on Martin's connections for any future opportunities. Ava absorbed this information with the same methodical approach she brought to chemistry problems. So, they're not trying to help me, they're trying to control me. Exactly. But why? What do they gain by ruining my life? Nolan had been wondering the same thing. The obvious answer was control. But there had to be something deeper driving such an elaborate scheme. I think, Nolan said carefully, that your grandfather sees you as a threat somehow. Something about your potential, your independence, your relationship with me makes him want to neutralize you. Ava considered this. Or maybe it's not about me at all. Maybe I'm just a way to get to you. Her insight was startling in its clarity. Nolan had been so focused on protecting Ava that had missed the possibility that she was being used as a weapon against him. What do you mean? Think about it, Dad. Grandpa Martin has never liked you. Mom's been acting weird for months now. Suddenly, I'm facing federal allegations that could destroy my future and make our family completely dependent on Grandpa's help. Maybe the real target isn't me. Maybe the real target is me. Ava nodded. And maybe everything that's about to happen is designed to break you. Nolan realized his daughter had identified the true scope of the conspiracy. Ava's frame-up wasn't just about controlling her future. It was about destroying Nolan's ability to protect his family and resist Martin's dominance. Ava, if you're right, then what's coming next is going to be worse than we imagined. How much worse? Nolan thought about Martin's confidence, Megan's increasing distance, and the sophisticated nature of the manufactured materials against Ava. This wasn't a simple family dispute. It was a coordinated attack designed to achieve total victory. Much worse. But, Ava, I need you to remember something important. What? I've never lost a war. And I'm not starting with this one. Nolan's home office had transformed into a war room. Maps, photographs, financial records, and surveillance equipment covered every surface. For the past week, since refusing Martin's plea bargain, Nolan had been conducting the most important intelligence operation of his career. Ava found him there at midnight, surrounded by the tools of his former profession. She had been unable to sleep, anxiety about her approaching hearing keeping her awake despite her faith in her father's promises. Dad, what are you doing? Nolan looked up from a computer screen displaying financial transactions. Learning who I'm really fighting. Ava studied the scattered documents, recognizing some names and faces from family gatherings. This looks like you're investigating our own family. I am. Sit down, Ava. There are things you need to know. Over the next hour, Nolan laid out the intelligence Head gathered. Using contacts from his military days, Head conducted deep background investigations into everyone involved in Ava's case. Victor Langley, Nolan began, pointing to a photograph of the attorney, isn't just having an affair with your mother. He's been systematically seducing spouses of government contractors for the past 5 years. Ava frowned. Why? Industrial espionage. Langley represents foreign-aligned companies trying to gain advantages in federal contracting. He uses his relationships with contractors' spouses to gather intelligence about upcoming projects, security protocols, and bidding strategies. The revelation hit Ava like a physical blow. So, Mom isn't special to him. She's just another target. Exactly. And Martin isn't just a compromised judge. He's been selling case information to interested parties for years, trial strategies, evidence details, plea negotiations, all available for the right price. Nolan showed Ava financial records indicating suspicious payments to offshore accounts connected to Martin's name. The amounts were substantial enough to suggest systematic corruption rather than occasional ethical lapses. But why frame me? Ava asked. How does damaging my life help their scheme? Nolan pulled up a different set of documents. Because I was getting close to exposing them. My security clearance gives me access to federal contracting databases. I'd been noticing patterns in bid awards that suggested information leaks. If I'd continued investigating, I would have discovered Langley's network and Martin's involvement. So, they needed to neutralize you. They needed to destroy my credibility and my family simultaneously. If you're convicted of a federal violation, I lose my security clearance immediately. Megan divorces me and takes half our assets. Martin gains custody influence over you through your mother, and am left with nothing. Ava absorbed the scope of the conspiracy against them. It's not just about money. It's about power and revenge. Martin has always resented me for marrying Megan. In his mind, she deserved better than a government contractor. This scheme lets him destroy me while positioning himself as the family savior. Ava stood and paced around the room, processing information with the methodical approach Nolan had taught her. Dad, if you know all this, why haven't you gone to the authorities? Because Martin is the authorities. He has connections throughout the federal judiciary, and the evidence I've gathered isn't legally admissible because of how I obtained it. So, we're fighting a war where the enemy controls the battlefield and the rules. Nolan smiled grimly at his daughter's tactical assessment. Exactly. Which means we have to change the game entirely. How? Nolan pulled out a final folder, this one containing detailed surveillance photographs and technical equipment specifications. By giving them exactly what they think they want. Over the next 2 hours, Nolan outlined his strategy. It was complex, risky, and required Ava to play a role that would test her courage and intelligence to their limits. You want me to appear to break down and accept the plea bargain? I want you to appear to realize that your father can't protect you from Martin's power. Tomorrow you're going to call your grandfather and tell him you've changed your mind. Ava looked skeptical. Won't that just give them what they wanted all along? No. Because the plea bargain isn't their real goal. They want complete psychological dominance over both of us. Martin wants me to watch helplessly as my daughter's life is controlled by forces I can't stop. If you cave in, he'll want to push further. Exactly. Martin will escalate, demanding more concessions, more control, more humiliation. And when he does, he'll reveal the full scope of his network and his methods. Ava understood the strategy, but worried about the execution. Dad, what if something goes wrong? What if I actually end up detained? Nolan met her eyes with absolute conviction. Ava, I've spent 19 years in intelligence work. I've operated in hostile territories where mistakes meant disaster. This is just another mission, and I've never failed to bring my people home. But this isn't just any mission. This is your daughter's life, which is exactly why I want fail. The next morning, Ava called Martin with a performance worthy of an Academy Award. Nolan listened on a monitoring device as his daughter delivered a tearful capitulation. Grandpa Martin, I can't do this anymore. I'm scared. I want to take the plea bargain. Martin's voice carried satisfied triumph. Ava, you're making the right choice. But I'm afraid the situation has become more complicated. Ava glanced at Nolan, who nodded encouragingly. What do you mean? The prosecutor has discovered additional information. The plea terms have changed. Changed how? 6 months in federal detention rather than probation, and you'll need to provide testimony about other students who might be involved in prohibited activities. Ava's shock was genuine. Other students? Grandpa? I don't know anything about other students. I didn't do anything in the first place. Of course not, dear. But cooperation with authorities is expected. I'm sure you can recall suspicious behavior among your classmates. Nolan clenched his fists as he listened to Martin pressure his granddaughter to implicate innocent teenagers to support a false narrative. I need to think about this, Ava stammered. Time is limited, Ava. The prosecutor wants an answer by tomorrow. After Ava hung up, Nolan saw tears of anger in her eyes. Dad, he wants me to damage other kids' lives to save my own. And that tells us something important about Martin's operation. He's not just framing you. He's building a network of compromised teenagers who can be controlled through fear. Ava wiped her eyes, transforming from frightened girl to determined young woman. What's the next step? Tomorrow, you're going to agree to his terms, and then we're going to give Martin and his partners the biggest surprise of their lives. That evening, as Megan prepared dinner with unusual attention to detail, Nolan observed his wife's behavior with new understanding. She had been reporting their conversations to Martin and Langley, providing intelligence about Nolan's reactions and Ava's emotional state. How did Ava's call with Dad go? Megan asked with carefully casual interest. She's scared. Martin's wearing her down. Megan nodded with what appeared to be maternal concern, but was actually strategic assessment. Maybe that's for the best. Dad knows how to navigate these situations, right? Martin certainly seems to have inside knowledge about how Ava's case will develop. Nolan watched Megan's face carefully as he planted the seed of suspicion. If she reported this comment to Martin, it would confirm their communication channel and possibly provoke a mistake. Dad's just experienced, Megan replied, but her voice carried a note of uncertainty. That night, Nolan made final preparations for the next phase of his operation. Using encrypted communication with Owen Barrett and other former colleagues, he coordinated surveillance assets and technical support. Ava found him checking equipment in his office. Dad, I keep thinking about what Grandpa Martin said about other students. How many innocent kids might be caught up in this? Probably more than we know. Martin's been a federal judge for 13 years. If he's been running operations like this throughout his career, the damage could be extensive. Ava's expression hardened. Then we're not just fighting for my freedom. We're fighting to stop him from hurting other families. Nolan felt pride surge through him as he watched his daughter transform from victim to warrior. Ava, tomorrow is going to test everything you've learned about courage and intelligence. Are you ready? I'm ready, Dad. Let's destroy them. The federal courthouse buzzed with morning activity as Nolan and Ava arrived for what Martin believed would be his granddaughter's complete capitulation. Nolan had spent the previous night making final preparations, ensuring every recording device, surveillance asset, and communication channel was operational. Ava wore a conservative dress that made her look younger and more vulnerable, an image calculated to encourage Martin's overconfidence. She'd practiced her role extensively, learning to project defeat while maintaining internal strength. Martin waited in a conference room adjacent to the prosecutor's office, his demeanor radiating satisfaction. Megan sat beside him, her anxiety now clearly visible despite attempts to appear supportive. Ava, Martin began with false grandfatherly warmth. I'm proud of you for making the right decision. 4 to 6 months in federal detention isn't pleasant, but it's far better than the alternative. Grandpa, about testifying against other students, Ava said softly. I don't know anything about prohibited activities at school. Martin's expression became coldly instructional. Ava, cooperation with law enforcement requires flexibility. Sometimes we must recall details that initially seemed unimportant. Nolan watched his daughter process the judge's instruction to fabricate evidence against innocent teenagers. Ava's training held. She appeared cowed while internally cataloging Martin's demands. I understand, Ava said quietly. Excellent. Now, there's one additional matter we need to discuss. Martin produced a legal document that Nolan recognized as a financial power of attorney. The implications were staggering. Martin was positioning himself to control not just Ava's legal situation, but her financial future as well. This document ensures that your legal fees and related expenses are properly managed during your detention period, Martin said smoothly. Your grandfather will oversee all financial decisions affecting your case. Ava looked at the document with apparent confusion. What financial decisions? Appeals if necessary, expert witnesses, potential civil litigation. These matters require experienced judgment. Nolan realized that Martin wasn't content with destroying Ava's immediate prospects. He intended to claim legal control over any assets Ava might inherit or earn. The financial power of attorney would give Martin long-term leverage over his granddaughter's life. Ava, you need to sign this document before we meet with the prosecutor, Martin insisted. Ava glanced at Nolan, who gave a subtle signal. This was the moment they'd prepared for. Martin's demand for complete legal control revealed the true scope of his scheme. Grandpa, I don't understand why I need to sign this. Can't Mom and Dad handle my financial issues? Martin's mask slipped slightly. Your parents have demonstrated poor judgment in this matter. You need experienced guidance to navigate these complex issues. But if I'm only going for a few months, why do you need control over my money? Martin's frustration became visible. Ava, sign the document. We don't have time for extended discussions. The pressure confirmed what Nolan had suspected. Martin needed Ava's complete capitulation to protect his own exposure. If Ava maintained any independence, she might eventually discover evidence of Martin's role in framing her. Ava picked up the pen with apparent resignation, then paused. Grandpa, can I ask you something? What? How did you know I'd be at the lab during those specific times when the security cameras caught me? The question detonated like a precision charge. Martin's face went through several color changes as he realized Ava had identified a crucial flaw in their fabricated timeline. The footage shows when I was there. Ava continued evenly. But you mentioned those specific dates before anyone showed you the footage. You told Mom and Dad about my unauthorized access before the police had even analyzed the evidence. Nolan watched Martin struggle to recover from Ava's observation. She had identified proof of prior knowledge that could only come from involvement in planning her setup. Ava, you're confused about the timeline, Martin said weakly. No, Grandpa. I remember exactly what you said and when you said it. You knew details about evidence before that evidence was supposedly discovered. Megan looked between her father and her daughter with growing alarm. Dad, what is Ava talking about? Martin's judicial composure cracked completely. Ava, you will sign the document, accept the plea, and provide testimony about other students' prohibited activities. This is not a negotiation. Ava met her grandfather's rage with calm determination. No, Grandpa, I won't sign anything, and I won't lie about other students. Then you'll go to federal custody for 14 years, Martin snarled, abandoning all pretense of concern. Maybe, Ava replied, but at least I'll go with my integrity intact. Nolan had never been prouder of another human being. Ava had faced down a corrupt federal judge with courage that would have impressed seasoned intelligence operatives. Martin turned his fury on Nolan. This is your doing. You've poisoned Ava against her own family. I've taught Ava to recognize when she's being manipulated by people who claim to love her, Nolan said. You think you're clever, Nolan. You think you can outmaneuver the federal justice system. I think you've made mistakes that are about to cost you everything. Martin's eyes narrowed dangerously. What mistakes? Nolan smiled with cold satisfaction. The mistake of underestimating your enemy. The mistake of assuming your position makes you untouchable. And the mistake of threatening my daughter. Are you threatening me again? No, Martin. I'm explaining why you've already lost. As if on cue, Nolan's phone buzzed with a text from Owen Barrett. Package delivered. Martin noticed Nolan checking his phone and grew visibly nervous. What package? The package containing evidence of your criminal conspiracy to frame Ava, your years of corruption on the bench, and your coordination with Victor Langley's industrial espionage network. Martin went pale. You're bluffing. Ask Victor. He should be receiving a similar package right about now. Megan finally spoke, her voice small and frightened. Nolan, what's happening? Justice, Megan. Something your father hasn't seen in years. Martin pulled out his phone with shaking hands, presumably to contact Langley. Whatever response he received made his face go ashen. You can't prove anything, he said desperately. I can prove everything, Nolan replied. Financial records, communication intercepts, surveillance footage, testimony from other victims of your schemes. 19 years of intelligence work taught me to be very thorough. Ava watched her grandfather's collapse with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Grandpa, why did you do this to me? Martin looked at his granddaughter with something approaching genuine emotion for the first time in months. Ava, you have to understand your father was getting too close to things that could destroy important people. This was never supposed to hurt you. But it did, she said quietly. You were willing to send me away to protect yourself. Nolan stood. Decision made. Ava, we're leaving. Martin, you have 24 hours to ensure the case against my daughter is withdrawn before the evidence of your crimes becomes public. I can't just make federal charges disappear, Martin protested. You made them appear, Ava said. You can make them disappear. As they prepared to leave, Martin made one final desperate attempt at leverage. Nolan, if you expose me, you'll destroy Megan too. She's innocent in all this. Nolan looked at his wife, seeing her clearly for the first time in months. Megan has been reporting our private conversations to you and Langley for weeks. She's not innocent, she's complicit. Megan's face crumpled as her betrayal was exposed. I thought I was protecting Ava. You thought you were protecting yourself? Nolan said. There's a difference. Nolan and Ava left the courthouse with their heads high, knowing that tomorrow would bring either complete victory or total war. Either way, they would face it together. The appeals court hearing was scheduled for 9:20 a.m. on a crisp Tuesday morning that would forever change the Reeves family's destiny. Nolan arrived early carrying a single manila envelope that contained the culmination of weeks of preparation and nearly 2 decades of intelligence expertise. Ava sat beside him in the gallery, her composure remarkable for a 17-year-old facing the possibility of adult federal custody. She'd grown stronger through their ordeal, transforming from a sheltered teenager into a young woman who understood that sometimes courage was the only response to betrayal. Martin entered the courtroom with his usual commanding presence, but Nolan noticed signs of strain around his eyes. The judge had spent the past week attempting to negotiate his way out of Nolan's trap, but each contact with potential allies only deepened his isolation. Megan arrived separately, taking a seat across the aisle from Nolan and Ava. She avoided eye contact, her face bearing the weight of choices that led to this moment. The 3-judge appeals panel entered precisely on time. Presiding Judge Andrew Pierce, joined by Judge Lila Benton and Judge Renee Park. Nolan had researched all 3 extensively, confirming their reputations for integrity and thoroughness. We're here to review the case of Ava Reeves, Judge Pierce announced. I understand there are new developments in this matter. Martin rose with practiced confidence. Your Honors, the defendant wishes to withdraw her appeal and accept the original arrangement. The materials against her remain overwhelming. Judge Pierce looked surprised. Is this correct, Ms. Reeves? Ava stood with dignity that commanded the courtroom's attention. No, Your Honor. I'm innocent of all charges, and I believe I can prove it. Martin's face flushed. Your Honor, the defendant is a minor who has been influenced by her father's misguided advice. The plea remains in her best interest. Your Honor, Nolan said, rising. I have evidence that fundamentally changes this case. Judge Pierce studied him. You're not an attorney, Mr. Reeves. What evidence could you possibly present to this court? Nolan held up the envelope. Evidence of a criminal conspiracy to frame my daughter, manipulate court proceedings, and obstruct justice. The courtroom fell silent. Martin went pale. Megan covered her mouth in shock. That's a serious allegation, Judge Pierce said carefully. What specifically are you claiming? I'm claiming that Judge Martin Hale, in coordination with attorney Victor Langley, manufactured evidence against my daughter as part of a broader scheme involving judicial corruption and industrial espionage. Martin shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is outrageous. Judge Pierce raised a hand. Mr. Reeves, these are extraordinary claims. Do you have evidence to support them? Nolan approached the bench and handed over the envelope. Everything is documented in detail, Your Honor. As the panel opened the packet, Nolan presented with military precision. The evidence shows that Ava's arrest was orchestrated using falsified security footage, planted materials related to prohibited compounds, and perjured statements. The timing corresponds directly to my inquiry into contracting irregularities that would have exposed Judge Hale's corruption. Judge Benton examined the documents with growing alarm. These records reflect payments from offshore accounts to Judge Hale over several years. Judge Hale, do you have an explanation? Martin's color shifted. Those records could be fabricated. Actually, Nolan said, they were obtained by investigators with proper legal authority from federal banking databases. They're authenticated. Judge Park looked up. Mr. Reeves, this suggests a pattern of corruption across multiple cases. Are you alleging systematic manipulation of proceedings? Yes, Your Honor, and I have testimony from other victims coerced into false admissions to protect this network. At this, Martin abandoned all pretense. This is a conspiracy against me. Nolan Reeves is inventing stories to protect his daughter. Judge Pierce's tone cooled. Judge Hale, the evidence appears substantial and credible. Nolan continued. The evidence also shows Ava was targeted because my clearance gave me access to information that could expose the network. Destroying her future was meant to neutralize my ability to investigate. Ava spoke, her voice clear. Your Honor, my grandfather threatened to have me treated as an adult and sent away for 14 years if I didn't plead guilty to what I didn't do. He also demanded I falsely implicate other students to support a fabricated narrative. The courtroom erupted. Martin shouted denials while Megan sobbed. Security restored order as the judges conferred in hushed tones. Judge Pierce called for silence. Given the extraordinary nature of these allegations and the substantial evidence presented, this court is suspending all proceedings against Ava Reeves pending a full federal investigation. Martin tried again. Your Honor, you can't simply accept the word of a disgruntled family member over a federal judge with 13 years of distinguished service. Judge Park responded evenly. We're not accepting anyone's word. We're examining documented evidence of criminal behavior. The attempt to pressure a minor into false testimony is particularly disturbing. Ava squeezed Nolan's arm as they watched Martin's world collapse in real time. Furthermore, Judge Pierce continued, we're referring this matter to the FBI for immediate action. Judge Hale, you are hereby suspended from all judicial duties pending the outcome. Martin sagged into his chair, the man who had terrified his granddaughter now facing that same terror himself. Megan approached as the courtroom cleared. Nolan, I'm sorry. I thought Dad was protecting Ava. You reported our private conversations for weeks, Nolan said. You helped them anticipate us. I was scared. Dad said Ava would be taken if we didn't cooperate. Ava's reply was quiet but firm. You chose to believe him instead of trusting Dad. That choice broke our family. As they walked out, Nolan's phone buzzed again from Owen. Langley detained 90 minutes ago. Network unraveling. Your move checkmate. Nolan showed Ava the message. It's over, sweetheart. You're free. Ava smiled for the first time in weeks. We're both free, Dad. 7 months after Martin's arrest, Nolan stood in his redesigned office, now cleared of surveillance gear and war room materials. The space had returned to architectural planning and government contracting, but the man who occupied it had been changed by the battle for his daughter's freedom. Ava entered carrying college acceptance letters, her face glowing with vindication. MIT, Stanford, and Caltech had all reversed their initial decisions once her case was dismissed and the full story became public. Dad, look at this, Ava said, holding up a letter from MIT's dean. They're offering a full scholarship and a formal apology for relying on fraudulent information. Nolan read the letter with pride. You not only cleared your name, you turned their attempt to break you into opportunity. It feels good to win, Ava admitted. But I keep thinking about the other families he hurt. The FBI's inquiry had uncovered a network of corruption spanning Martin's judicial career. More than 190 cases showed signs of coercion and manufactured evidence. The review board says most of those outcomes are being vacated, Nolan said. Victims are finally getting compensation. What about Victor Langley? Federal custody, 23 years for industrial espionage, racketeering, and conspiracy. The network he ran through compromised spouses is fully exposed. Ava's expression turned serious. Megan's fate remained a source of tension. Your mother testified against Martin and Langley in exchange for immunity, Nolan said. She claims manipulation rather than complicity. Do you believe her? I believe she was weak and self-protective. The choices she made nearly destroyed your life. Have you talked to her? She's requested meetings. I've declined. You're not going to forgive her, are you? Forgiveness implies someone deserves a second chance after betraying trust. She reported our private talks and supported a scheme to frame you. Those aren't mistakes, they character reveals. A knock at the door. Owen Barrett stepped in, carrying the update Nolan expected. Martin's sentencing is set for next week, Owen said. Recommendation: 24 years for corruption, conspiracy, and civil rights violations. Ava felt a complicated mix of satisfaction and sadness. Any last-minute deals? Nolan asked. None. He's isolated. The people who thought he was untouchable have stepped away. Justice delayed, Nolan said, but not denied. How are you holding up, Ava? Owen asked. My family wasn't torn apart by what Dad did, she answered. It was torn apart by what they did. Dad just revealed the damage that was already there. That's a mature perspective for someone who's 17, Owen said. When your own grandfather tries to send you away, you grow up fast. After Owen left, Ava asked softly, Do you regret how it ended with Martin destroyed and Mom out of our lives? I regret that Martin made me choose between his comfort and your freedom, Nolan said. I regret that your mother chose her convenience over your protection. I don't regret choosing you. They prepared dinner together, talking about dorms and research labs. Will you come visit me at MIT? Every chance I get. You'll be okay here? I survived hostile theaters and a corrupt judge, Nolan said with a smile. I can handle an empty house. Later, Nolan's secure phone rang. A federal prosecutor. Another ring of compromised officials had been identified using tactics similar to Martin's. Would you and Ava consult? Nolan looked to Ava. She nodded. We'll help, he said. No other family should go through this. 3 years after Martin's conviction, Nolan sat in an MIT auditorium watching Ava, now 20, deliver her valedictory address. She'd completed her engineering degree at remarkable speed while also testifying before Congress on judicial integrity and advocating for victims' rights. My fellow graduates, Ava said, we enter a world where integrity is challenged by convenience, where courage is tested by comfort, and where standing for justice sometimes means standing alone. Nolan felt immense pride as officials, faculty, and families listened, rapt, while Ava recounted her story without self-pity, presenting facts with the precision Nolan had taught her. I survived because my father taught me that integrity matters more than convenience, that courage matters more than comfort, and that protecting innocent people sometimes requires stopping those who aren't. After the ceremony, admirers and journalists crowded around her. Owen found Nolan at the edge of the hall. News you expected, Owen said quietly. Martin died in federal custody last night. Cardiac failure under stress. Nolan felt no triumph, only the sense of a chapter closing. How did Ava take it? She said it was sad, but predictable. Custody isn't kind to officials who harmed innocent people. Ava joined them. Dad, did Owen tell you? Yes. How do you feel? I feel sad for who he could have been, Ava said. But I don't feel guilty. He chose what he chose. The Bureau wants you to keynote a conference on integrity next month, Owen added. They're using our case as a training model. If our story helps protect other families, the attention is worth it, Nolan said. There are rumors about Senator Reeves, Owen joked. Ava laughed. Engineering first. But understanding power and who can be trusted matters anywhere. As they walked out, Owen mentioned, your mother's attorney keeps asking to forward letters. Apologies. Explanations. Ava's expression tightened. I might read them for closure, not forgiveness. Nolan nodded. Remember, explanations aren't absolution. Reasons don't erase consequences. I know the difference. That evening, while cooking together, Ava asked, do you ever think about dating again someone who wouldn't betray you? Honestly, I don't trust my judgment about people's character anymore, Nolan said. That doesn't mean everyone's untrustworthy. No. It means I won't risk our peace for a guess. What about happiness? You're my happiness, Nolan said. Watching you thrive beats any other version I can imagine. Later, a federal prosecutor called. Another cluster using Martin-style tactics had been identified. Will you and Ava consult again? We will, Nolan said. Ava nodded beside him. We're getting good at this. There are worse careers, she smiled. Do you regret the cost? Nolan asked her. I regret that they were the kind of people who could betray family, Ava said. I don't regret learning the truth or fighting back. Before bed, Ava paused at Nolan's office door. Thank you for protecting me when everyone else failed. Protecting you was the easiest decision I've ever made. I know, and I won't doubt you again. Nolan watched his daughter head upstairs, feeling a profound sense of completion. Langley remained in federal custody. Megan was out of their lives. Ava was thriving, an engineer and a defender of those who couldn't defend themselves. In his office, Nolan sealed a letter for Ava's future wedding day, a message about choosing a partner who proves loyalty through consistent action. He locked it away, confident she would demand the same integrity she had fought for. The next morning's headlines announced another compromised official arrested based on patterns Ava helped uncover. Justice was spreading one case at a time. Nolan Reeves had never lost a war, and this war, the one for his daughter's future and the integrity of the system, was his greatest victory. That's the end of today's story. If you haven't yet, please like the video, subscribe, and turn on the bell. What are your thoughts? Share them in the comments. We read them all. And thanks for watching. You're always welcome here.